I found this to be true, that a lot of directors will go like, it'll just be them and a camera for like a long time, right? Like you'll just like, that's kind of pretty much how you have to start. You're like, it's me, it's a camera, maybe a couple people. And then you might like accidentally make something kind of great. And then someone might call you, and then you might get lucky and just like somehow win a job. And then you're just on set. And so that's really how it happened for me, was like, I found myself on some big sets early, just utterly out of my depth, like beyond out of my depth. And everyone on the crew was 10 times more experienced than me. And dude, like, I mean, I was like over the toilet gagging every morning. We're going to set being like, there's 200 people waiting at this place. There's 150 extras. But as like you become like more of a pro, you want to know how you would execute it and how you would bring your vision and your style to it.
Welcome to Frame by Frame. I have my friend who I met in New York City years ago, Marcus Tortorici. He's an award-winning director, repped at Voyager TV, but coming to us from the great state of Alabama. Marcus, thank you so much for joining Frame by Frame.
What's up, Daniel? Thanks for having me, man.
I want to dive into your story today, get into your creative process. You're someone who I think, your visuals equally match your storytelling ability. So I want to talk about that. And then I want to talk about getting repped as a director. I feel like that's a little bit of a mysterious process. So would love to break that down. And with that, you're at Voyager TV as a director. And I'm curious, what have you been working on? Do you have anything coming up exciting project wise? What's going on in the Voyager and in your world?
Man, 2024 was a crazy year with them. It was a really good year. I think I probably did more projects than I've ever done. So right now I'm stuck deep in a few edits. I did this hospital campaign in San Francisco later last year. And so I'm deep in that edit right now. We already finished up the one for the client, but I kind of end up doing a director's cut for the projects that are worth it. Because I tend to lose, in the US, you tend to lose control of the edit pretty quickly. What you call wrap. It's sort of different in Europe. But anyway, so I end up having to I see the cut sometimes and I want to cry. And so then sometimes I'll take the cut and redo it. And I'm like, yes, there's the film that I thought we shot. Anyway, so working on that. And then I just actually wrote a script a few weeks ago. And I'm trying to get that produced kind of quickly and shoot that before the next commercial project happens. So it's just a short.
Yeah. And I'm curious, kind of the traffic flow of that. Is it work where you're out finding new commercial work? Is Voyager bringing it to you? How does that kind of traffic flow work?
So normally when you're repped and you're on a roster of directors, like that production company, their full-time gig is trying to find you work. They have sales reps, but really it's more of a partnership. So, you're not getting paid a salary or anything like that. But their goal is basically to try and sell their directors and try and get them work. Because if I get work, then they get paid. So they kind of get a percentage. They get the largest percentage of the budget of whatever job might come in. I'll usually get a smaller percentage, but I don't have the added responsibility of running the production company, the overhead. Like they kind of set it up and I knock it down sort of. And so they really focus on the bid, the financials. And so when we're working together, I really focus on the creative bid and the creative pitch. So I usually put together a monster deck, kind of talking with them the whole time as they're kind of looking at the toys. I'm like, yeah. And then this techno crane shot comes over the hill and they're like, yeah, it's that definitely not a techno crane shot. Or they're like, yeah, we can do that. And so they're usually reeling me in or reining me back a little bit, or kind of we're trying to decide together how many days are we shooting, what's happening. And then we really present all of that at one time, the financial bid, the creative bid. I get on the call, try and sell myself to the agency. And if we're lucky, they hire us. So yeah, in my world, there's no guarantees. It's super feast or famine. When you're not working, you're not working. And then when you are working, it's awesome. And there's not a ton you can be doing to drum up work other than just working on your craft, making personal projects, trying to network with creative directors and things like that to kind of get on their radar. But how it's worked for me for a while is I'm sitting around doing nothing. And then I get a call and it's like, hey, can you talk to the agency tomorrow? There's $1 million job that we got to try and it. And I'm like, yes. And then I stop whatever I'm doing. I drop everything, cancel all my plans. It's usually once I've like booked a vacation and like maybe my child is being born or whatever. I can almost guarantee I'll get a job if I have a big life event coming up. That's when I can almost guarantee I'll get one. And then I have to just sort of drop everything and dive all in, creatively to try and come up with a direction for what the spot should be.
Cool. Well, let's like start there a little bit into your process. So new client comes in. Do you start writing right away? Are you building the deck first and then fill in the gaps? What does your process look like for that?
So, I mean, when I first get the agency deck, I try to just break it down like as thoroughly as possible. So like for me, I think it's super important to go into that, they might call it a discovery call. The expectation is that like, they're going to be kind of giving you information about the call, but I almost find that is really the first opportunity to start to pitch a few concepts and ideas and just be feeling them out for like what they are or not into. Early in my career, I used to like treat those calls for what they were, which was just like hey, tell me about the project. And then I'll go think about the project. But I really think that like, that's not really the case as things get more competitive and there's more directors and they're better and better and better. You're always trying to find that kind of edge against the other directors for how you might win the job. And I think a lot of it is, so like I might have less than 24 hours. And sometimes within that period of time, I have my whole pitch already ready, but I'm not going to just dump it all on them. I'll probably feel them out and be like, what do you think if we kind of like, I'm thinking like we could approach it in this way, or like maybe the camera's doing something like this. You kind of just really kind of tip check those guys on what they're really into. And then I usually record the call and try and like diagnose the things that really landed and didn't land. Like that's your opportunity to kind of like be wrong and throw a few things out that are maybe a little crazy just to see how far you can push it. And if they're like, well, it's really not what we're thinking at all, then you're like, all right, let me not include that in my treatment, as opposed to just being like, oh, I've got a great idea. Let me include it in the treatment. So it's good to like go ahead and get ahead of some of that stuff. And then, then I'll just, if I had a call with them, I'll always sleep on it. And then like, I'm a morning person. So like I work best when the sun's coming up or the sun's going down. I work terribly in the middle of the day. So like, I'll hit it super hard in the morning and just start writing, and I'll write and write and write, find references. And that's something too, when I'm not working, I'm always trying to watch other people's work. So I always have just like a bank of references in my mind to be kind of pulling from. So much of this job is referencing and remixing what other people have done or finding the things about you in other people's work that you really like, gravitate towards. And
let's talk about like the tools too that you're using. Are you in Pages, Canva? Are you using FrameSet or ShotDeck for your images? What does that kind of like nitty gritty look like?
I'm pretty like technically challenged with like a lot of this stuff. Like people will ask me like what I'll design treatments in, which is really funny. So like I'll do like Keynote. I'll do like the worst possible software for designing. Like, but to be fair, if it's a good sized job, I always outsource the design. Like the company I'm with will always hire usually a team overseas that'll put together just like a monster killer deck with like tons of GIFs or GIFs or whatever you call them and moving images. And so I will write, like I use Evernote, which is just like a super simple like note program that my buddy on 10 years ago in New York. Yeah, like I hate that software so much. It's the worst. But it's just like, I just need a blank screen that I can write in. And so, I just use Evernote, and then I'm realizing now, like I could be using AI to like help refine some of that copy, which I've never done. So like I'll refine copy with my producers a little bit and get their feedback. And man, it used to be grueling for me. Like it used to take me a lot of days to write together a full treatment. I was just like, how am I supposed to it's just so you're hitting on every possible detail. And now like I can write it in a couple hours. I just like go and I just black out and then wake up and then it's written, so.
Okay. Well, I will encourage you. You have 2 kids. I have a son. As we know, time efficiency is just like insane. I have been using ChatGPT for my treatments, not to write the whole thing, but I found it like so helpful for like just kind of organizing my thoughts, and you can kind of like word vomit and it'll like spit it out, like back to you in like a nice format. And then I never use it verbatim, but it is nice to like put your thoughts together when you are on a time crunch.
Yeah.
So I would encourage you to check it out.
Yeah, I'm just now discovering the power of that. Like I'll write an email and then I'll copy and paste the email into ChatGPT and it will just help me word it a little bit different. I'm like, man, I hate that this thing is right on some of this stuff. So I might try it out on my next treatment just to see kind of what feedback. And I've been funneling a lot of my scripts into it. And just being like, hey, or even like one thing I'll do is I'll funnel my favorite work into it and I'll just be like, what are the themes? Like, what are the consistent themes in this work? And that will help me really shape like the kinds of stories and ideas that I want to be working on as well. And so I'm like uncovering how to use it as a tool for a creative as opposed to replacing a creative, I think.
Correct. Yeah, I 100% agree. It's becoming like just another tool in the toolkit. And one of those tools you hit on, which I want to go back to, is like the art of selling yourself to the agency. I think that's something, I feel like going through film school, just all these different things, like there's so much emphasis on the technical, which is like so important, but that part to me is like equally as important. And it's something you only really get better at the more you do it. How has that process of selling yourself been for you? Because it's tough as a creative, in my opinion.
Man, it's so hard. I'll start by saying some of it's luck. Like sometimes they just don't like you, or sometimes they've already got somebody in mind they really want to work with. Like, so sometimes you're starting off behind the eight ball, and sometimes you can get a feel for like where you are in the bid pool to start. Like you might be the guy they just kind of tossed in because they had to have a third person, or you might be the favorite going in. And if you can get an indication of how interested they are in working with you, that can help you know like how hardcore I got to go on this. Like if I'm in last place coming into the call and I know it because I see the other directors that I'm bidding against, sometimes you don't know. Like, all right, I got to throw a curveball, like. Whereas if I know they want to work with me, it's really more about like, just don't screw it up. Like I'm just going to throw a hard fastball. I'm going to be, I used to oversell myself so much. When I was in the driver's seat, I didn't know it, and I would write myself out of the job. I've done that 1,000 times because I wrote a concept that was just too bizarre, and just too creative or out there or whatever. And looking back on some of those, I was just like, man, why didn't I just pitch a strong concept? Which like, it's really about listening to what they want out of this project. It's asking about what their client is really interested in. And then it's about putting your spin on it, your twist on it, but you have to really stay true to the core of what they're interested in doing. Like they have a service to they have a obligation to their client to deliver what their client wants, but they also want to push things creatively. But if I just come in with some craziness, that's going to really lower my odds of getting the job. So that balance is really hard. And so it becomes kind of this game in that way. And then I don't worry about selling myself in any other way. I just kind of try and focus on how can I deliver something that they really want, and it's something that I really feel in my heart is going to be great. So that balance is like how I sell myself. Like I got to be really inspired by my own idea, and it has to really fit with something I'm always trying to decipher through their words and read between the lines. Like, what are they really after here? So like listening is one of the biggest parts of selling yourself, I think.
100%. And that was like, what about, so I feel like post-COVID world, it's a little bit different because these pitches aren't happening quite as much in person. It is online. Are you someone, like I'm someone, I do have to like rehearse the pitch a little bit out loud before going into the call. So I like feel like I know what I'm going to say. Are you someone like that? Or do you just like go in and wing it? What's your process?
I will completely collapse if I rehearse it. I'll freeze up. I'll go into a near panic attack. Like I've had many times where I'm on a call with 10 people and I'm like, should I kill the internet? Like, should I pretend the internet went down? Because like, I get that like stage fright thing where I'm just like, I'm so self-aware of what I'm about to say. And I'm just, it's terrible, dudes. Like as few times that I've tried that, it has backfired so much. So for me, my process is all about like, I know my concept in and out. I'm inspired by it. I love it. I'm fueled by what I'm doing. And that's all I need to know. So like, I just need to know the direction I want to go. Like my vision just needs to be crystal clear going into that call. And then I can really just speak from the heart. And that really works best for me. But when I start like thinking about certain lines I might say or certain places I might take it, forget about it. Complete disaster. I used to do that on dates too. You know, I'd be like, well, what should I talk with about this girl, or talk about with this girl? And dude, disaster. And so I was finally just like, why don't I just like speak from the heart, you know? And so that has to apply in a lot of areas of my life.
Well, Marcus did marry, a Filipino gal, so he must have figured it out. Shout out. You're in the Filipino family now.
We're doing something right, you know?
Now, you mentioned like writing yourself out of a job. I think there's like a whole host of other things. What are some of maybe like the mistakes you see like young directors make, and maybe tweaks that you would recommend for those young directors out there?
I mean, yeah, dude, I used to do some real boneheaded stuff. Like I think the biggest mistake is that young directors they'll go too far off book, if you will. Like they just feel like they got to do a lot. And sometimes like in my early career, like I would work with agencies that maybe didn't have a very clear vision, and that can work to your favor. Like when they come to you with a brief that's pretty amorphous, there's not a lot there. Sometimes like you can really take that and you can run with it. And I would actually encourage directors to do that, to sort of like find their voice. But as like you become like more of a pro, you have to focus more on like this thing has gone through rounds and rounds of revisions and testing, and like this agency may have been working on this for a year. Like by the time it gets to your desk or by the time you're on the call, and there's less like flexibility. They just want to know how you would execute it and how you would bring your vision and your style to it. And so, yeah, I would just say like the mistakes are, if knowing kind of like knowing like the origin of the project and how it's gotten to that point, and not writing yourself out of the job by trying to do too much, is definitely one big mistake. I'm trying to think of some other really dumb things that I did early on. Like I would focus a little too much in my treatments about like how I was going to execute some things. I'd be like, yeah, we're going to like attach the camera to this thing. It's kind of going to go up and down. I'm just like, they don't care. Like they don't care. Yep. Care how it's done. Like, but just communicate it really clearly. I would also kind of like wax poetic and get really, really like too wordy in like a philosophical way. And again, it's about just being really clear and really, really intentional about every decision that you're making. And I would just like, dude, if I read those old treatments, I'd be like, dude, what was this guy talking about? Like, what was he on? As I'm just like writing nonsense. And so trying to be efficient and clear is one of the biggest ones. And then on set, man, I mean, I found this to be true, that a lot of directors will go like, it'll just be them and a camera for like a long time, right? Like you'll just like, that's kind of pretty much how you have to start. You're like, it's me, it's a camera, maybe a couple people. And then you might like accidentally make something kind of great. And then someone might call you, and then you might get lucky and just like somehow win a job. And then you're just on set. And so that's really how it happened for me, was like, I found myself on some big sets early, just utterly out of my depth, like beyond out of my depth. And everyone on the crew was 10 times more experienced than me. And dude, like, I mean, I was like over the toilet gagging every morning we're going to set, being like, there's 200 people waiting at this place. There's 150 extras like filling this like stadium or this whatever. And these people are expecting me to tell them like what to do. And I'm used to just like kind of feeling it out in the moment and kind of like finding moments and doing this and doing that. And so the idea of having this like super clear vision going into the shoot for me was almost like foreign, like was not my process. And that is like something that I had to really adjust to. Like, I've just got to be so dialed in before I like walk onto the set. And so like the fact that I made it through any of those shoots, or that we didn't end up with just some like hot garbage, is like truly unbelievable. Like borderline miracle. And so anyway, like
let's start there, because I'm curious, like you said, one, from the great state of Alabama, but where did that whole like the filmmaking process start for you? And then, how did you kind of make that jump?
I think a big part of it is proximity. Like, I think I had like as much natural talent as any kid from any I say random state. I mean, Alabama is not necessarily a place that is heralded for its, creative
Filmmaking
industry.
hub. Yep.
Yeah, like I don't think I was necessarily any more special than anybody, but I just fell backwards into New York City, like kind of got stuck there on accident. I went there to like pursue film. Like I had been doing video stuff in high school. I loved acting. And truly, like I just didn't know what I really wanted to do. Like my family wasn't a family that was like, hey, you should really think about your career. Like this wasn't a conversation we had. So going into like college, I went to Alabama. It was like literally the first day of class or like we were at orientation, and when my mom was just like, what do you want to like do here? And I was like, I haven't even like considered it. I don't know. Like maybe she's like, they got a media program. And I was like, oh, that sounds cool. It's like first day of class, like frat dudes, like passed out drunk, like, no one's paying attention except for like, I'm just sitting in this class. And the teacher's like, who wants to direct this scene? And I'm like looking around, I raised my hand, and I talked about like, that was the day I became a director. Cause I was just like,
yeah,
I guess I'm a director or whatever. And I didn't quit that. And then, so when I graduated, all I really had done, like all I had to my name was just like some cool videos that I made in college. And I did get to make some cool videos. I won the film festival there 2 or 3 times, which was cool. Not like a ton of competition, but whatever. And then I'm sure now there is way more, but so I just like moved to New York with my buddy, and we were scrapping it, like super broke, super.
We all were then. We all were back then.
Dangerous situations. Like my family didn't have any money. His family didn't have any money. And you'll find that a lot of people that are early and young filmmakers that are really doing stuff, a lot of those guys, like their family has the brownstone in New York City. They went to NYU. They've got the trust fund. They got a lot of cash. They have a lot of freedom to make mistakes and try. That was not me. I didn't have $1. And like, I was literally eating, beans and ramen, and like, just, dude, it was a gnarly time, for a lot of years. And so I didn't understand how people were making like narrative work. And I didn't even know you can make money making commercials. I didn't even know that was like a thing. And so when I found out, I was like, wait, what did you make doing this commercial? Like, I need to make a commercial. I need to like eat. So for me, it was like, I have to succeed in order to survive. Like it was really only had one choice. And I think that helped in a way. And so when I got to New York, after 2 or 3 years of kind of like spinning my wheels, I wasn't super confident that I could do it. I was looking at guys being like, I want to do that, but I don't know if I have what it takes. I feel like at some point, I feel like God like spoke to me at some point, and he was just like, do it. Like, you're going to do it, commit to it, come hell or high water. You're going to be like a director. And that's really what I did. Probably in like 2015, I was like, screw it. I'm tired of questioning if I have what it takes. And I'm just completely sold out. Like, I will be a director, whatever that looks like, it's going to happen. And so I started I took like a few videos for a nonprofit. One was like a church, one was like whatever. And I always encourage people, like, work with nonprofits, work with people whose product is just like messaging, because that just got like total creative freedom. And so like I would take a project that was like, I probably had $2,000 for like the entire budget, and I would have to pay myself $1,000 out of it just to survive at the time.
Yep.
And I was like, I have to have 1,000 of this, like literally have to have it. You'd be like, how do I make a dope video for $1,000? And it would just be subject matter. Like, I'd pick great subject matter. I'd be in Harlem, or I'd be in North Philly, or I'd just be in some place where there was a lot of like texture and life, and I would shoot it in a way that just felt good to me. And then I would edit it, and then I would put it out there. And so like I did that 3 or 4 times. And I think some people thought they were like real jobs, like people thought they were like real commercials. They weren't. They were just videos that I was making. And I sent them to a few production companies, and this is part of the like proximity. Like, I had networked through friends on a few parties, met people. So much of it is they just like, if they like you and they want to hang out with you, that's a huge part of getting an opportunity. Like, you can make an amazing video, live in Alabama, and cold email that to production companies. You're not going to hear a thing. But if you make like a good video and you live in New York and they know you, or you live in LA and they know you, they're much more likely to give you an opportunity. They're much more likely to give you a meeting. But those people, like, they kind of gatekeep. Like, they don't really want to give you an opportunity if you're not there, because it's kind of like a rite of passage. Like, hey, I moved here. I'm paying the price to be here. So you're going to move here. You're going to pay the price before I give you real opportunity. So I think I'd earned my place where they felt like that they wanted to give me a shot and they liked me enough just personality wise. And one lady's like, so what's like your day rate? You know, like that was one of the first questions I got. And these are like from, you know, emails from production companies. And I'm like, I mean, I'm used to making like $500 on a video or whatever, you know, I have no clue. And then when she starts telling me some numbers, like my mind is like blowing. I'm like, this,
yeah, number, I can do that.
Yeah. And the number you're telling me is like 4x the budget I would think to make the video period, you know, like.
You start like the ascent. Is that, when does like your meeting with Voyager happen, and how do you end up getting signed by them?
So my break, or like actual big break came. So I'd made like 2 or 3 videos. It all happened pretty quickly. Like in 2015, I committed to being a director fully. 2016, I started making some cool videos. And then early 2017, I basically was like completely running out of money. I think I had like, because I've been doing these projects and spending all the money on the project, you know? And so I had like, maybe like $1,000 at some point in like early 2017. And I was like, I'm like in big trouble. But I had messaged a company in Philadelphia. It was a neighborhood film company. And they're a great company. Ricky Staub went on to like direct some really cool stuff for Netflix. I think they're still doing stuff. I don't know if they're doing as many commercials, and I had a cinematographer like vouch for me for this Star Wars job. It was literally like a Star Wars job for a kid's toy. And dude, like I just was like super fortunate that they wanted me to like pitch on the job. Like I'd send them some work and they're like, this is really beautiful. We have a small job for Star Wars. Like, do you want to pitch on it? And I was like, yes, absolutely.
Yes.
And they're like apologizing because the budget is so small, you know, they're like, oh, it's scrappy. And I'm like, yeah, I think it's going to be all right. And they didn't really have much of a script. It was just like, we want to make something cool for this Star Wars toy. And dude, I went hard. I just wrote like a full story, just like from the heart. Like I just went for it. And I pitched this like really cool concept about like kids in a neighborhood and they're like chasing this like signal and there's like an underground. It was a crazy concept and they just loved it. They were like, this is awesome. Let's do it. And I was like, okay. And then I'm like on a train to Philadelphia, like for this job. And I'm literally like sweating bullets because I meet up with the team there. And dude, this is like M. Night Shyamalan's team. This is the team that has done Silver Linings Playbook. They just assumed that I'm like an actual director at this time. Anyway, I could talk forever about just that project, how life-changing that was and how many unbelievably horrible choices I made on that production. Like I put that crew in just the worst positions time and time again. Like I chose like 20 locations. We had time maybe to visit 3, you know, like it didn't occur to me that like, oh, we don't have all the time in the world. Anyway, I had a great cinematographer and that project just turned out great. It won like several awards in Philadelphia at the time. And dude, it was just like, it was way cooler than it should have been. And so like that became like my real calling card.
That's your calling card. Yeah.
And so like now I had like a real proper commercial piece. Unbelievably like fortunate that it just worked out the way it did. And then like, so Voyager saw that, another company, Greenpoint Pictures, had seen a couple of things. And so then it's like a few people are knocking and trying to sign me like really all at one time. And that was really unexpected. People that I knew, like not everybody, but a few companies in New York were like, hey, we want to work with you, start giving you some jobs. If we like you, we want to sign you. And so Voyager gave me a job with Carmelo Anthony in Oklahoma City, like a small job, and went out and did it and it went well. And then, you know, yeah, they signed me. And that was probably in late 2017 that I officially signed with them, maybe early 2018. And yeah, dude, rest is history.
That's awesome. So from like practical, someone wants to get signed. It's really like you have to build that portfolio of work. And then you really didn't do any outreach to Voyager. They came knocking to you once you made the work that was like esteemed enough for them to notice, right?
You're in a better position to have them coming for you, certainly. Because production companies are getting 1,000 emails a day from directors who hoping their work is good enough. I'm in that phase where I'm even emailing production companies overseas. Like I'm in this phase now. I'm trying to get more international representation because once you sign domestically, you're exclusive. Like I can't work with anyone in the US. But during slow times, you're like, it's better to have reps internationally. So I'm talking to a company and a few in Canada and a few in Germany to try and sign on to kind of fill some of those gaps. And so, yes, they reached out to me. So it's a little bit of both. Like I'm reaching out to these companies. My reel is like strong enough now where like I will get a few replies, maybe out of like 60 emails, maybe I'll get 4 replies, or no, maybe a little more than that. But yeah, man, if you can generate a little bit of momentum, it's really all about like you do one thing and boom, just hit the next thing. Like, whether you're doing one's just like purely for the vibes, like music video, then it's like a commercial, then it's like a short, then it's whatever. And if you can generate enough momentum, especially on social media, like even on Instagram, I've had a lot of production companies reach out. They see the work on that and they'll be like, hey, I saw your work through this thing, or it was on Vimeo, or it won some award. You're in a much better position if they reach out to you, than just cold emailing like crazy, and
let's talk about social media for a second, because I feel like it is an interesting part of what we do. Of like, that's not why we got into the game, but I do think that is part of the game and building a brand. And I think the truth is like people, clients, agencies, they do want to work with people that have like some sort of following there. How do you go about approaching that?
I think it's important when you're coming up. So like the best directors in the world, like they don't post, they don't get on Instagram, they don't mess around with it. Like even the best commercial directors, once you're in the system, it's kind of like they don't care. They don't look at your social media. I'm pretty sure like they just see like once you're in the system and the sales reps are pushing you out and you have a reputation among like agencies, they're like, oh yeah, Marcus or Daniel or whatever. Like we know what he does. And they see your reel, they're looking at your reel, like, and that's really what they're looking at. But to get noticed, that's the first step, like getting noticed by production companies. And so that's when social media can really be helpful. But if I was doing it now, I would make as much interesting work as possible and I would push it on social, just to try and like generate, just like say, hey, I'm out here, like I exist, like I'm alive.
Totally.
The work is so good now and there's so much of it, like standing out is super hard. I think it's super hard right now.
Dude, it is. It's crazy. Like, I mean, we met right around that same time, 2014, 2015, kind of like on that rise. But it's interesting being in our 30s. Like I'm starting to find myself like creep over the shoulder now, looking back like, man, like these kids, they've grown up with these tools as much as we did. Like it's even more now. And like, there's so much talent and it's so competitive. It's pretty wild.
They're doing stuff that like just blows my mind, and I'm like, I think that's part of it too. Like the lifespan of a commercial director can be short. Like before your career can just be over. And so to be sort of innovating, constantly and pushing the needle constantly is also important. And it's a tough game, man. It's super, super competitive and there's more players in the game there's ever been and they're more savvy than ever. And so, yeah, like as a dad, everything in my life is pulling me away from my directing career constantly.
Yep.
And it's like,
and it's the best, but yes, it's just the reality.
Yeah. Like I would have launched so much further if I did not have a wife and 2 children. Like that is this reality. That is something that was valuable to me. So at some point you got to evaluate what you care about in your life, and I wasn't someone who was just like, my career is all that matters. If it was, I wouldn't have made these sacrifices, if you will, to do that. So that's something I'm always like wrestling with.
Same. I've been a dad. That was almost 2. So it's definitely been like a big adjustment. But like you said, the values, alignment, I think all those things are super important. And it's different for everyone. Like you said, some people want to just go in all in their career and that's great. But some people want the balance. But it's definitely trying to feel it out and figure it out has been my experience.
Yeah.
Your work like is always so visually compelling. And it's tied with story. How much emphasis are you putting like on the two? Because I think you just always have like your visuals like really always match your story, which I think is just so cool and important.
Appreciate that. I guess I've always been a pretty visual director in a lot of ways. Like I think for me, when I get a script, it's really simple. like how do I make it visually compelling? And so like I do tend to get hired for like, hey, we have a very human story, but we want it to be very visually compelling and unique in a way. And so I'm always trying to kind of like create that special sauce where the visuals just really stand on their own, but we haven't lost the humanity of the story either. Like the two kind of try and coexist at the same time. And so like I'm not like a doc style guy. I don't like stripped down. I like big lights, big toys. I'm really big into set design, really big into location, really big into wardrobe, really big into casting. Like all of these things come together for me to create a great image. And so even in the simplest film or the simplest commercial, like I'm just a devil. Well, I'm just the devil's in the details, but I'm just like a stickler for the details because I think that a great image is like 10 or 12 different things at one time. And if you let one of them fall to the wayside, like that can really hurt my work because sometimes the subject matter may be a family or it may be something that's not so amazing. So I'm like really trying to curate, everything about the image while getting the good performance, at the same time. So, and that's a lot with, working with a cinematographer as well and stuff like that to kind of create that.
And how did you kind of like graduate to that point, right? Because I feel like most of us starting off, like you said, it's kind of just you and a camera and maybe like one other person. But then as the jobs get bigger and you can have more of that team, I think you really see it. But I think it's like that gap between sometimes feels a little overwhelming to like make everything feel cohesive.
It's good to start thinking about at the earliest phase. Like I wouldn't walk into a location. I didn't know how to evaluate a location, really. I didn't know how to evaluate what the talent might be wearing. But like as the more you can start to sort of like get the elements to be cohesive and thinking about like color theory and thinking about like a palette, like for me, I think my buddy always said like what did he say? A palette is like 3 colors or something like that. And so we tend to think of spaces and locations in terms of like 3 colors and not having one really jump out and stand out and pull your eye away from a certain scene. And so I did have started working with production designers and wardrobe stylists, which was helpful. But even then, man, they would come in and like, I have to be really prescriptive with them about, it's like I'll get on an hour-long call with a wardrobe person and be like, this is exactly what I'm looking for. And that took a long time. That took years for me to kind of develop that sense of taste or that eye for what they should be wearing, what the couch should look like, what the lampshade might look like, what the rug is, like that kind of stuff. And with a great production designer, you just give them the big vision and they get it. But when you're coming up, especially, oftentimes you're the one picking those elements. And so it's good to start really wrapping your head around and just dissecting images from directors that you love and just being like, what makes this a great image? Like, what is it really? Is it just the light? Is it just the actor? Is it just the set design? And there's so many, you realize it's everything. And so picking one thing you can do so early on is just pick great locations. Like that's what I did when I was coming up was I picked great locations and I picked great times of day, and that you don't have to have much else, and pick a great subject. Like you get a person who looks awesome on camera, is wearing the right thing in the right location at the right time of day. You've got a film, like in a lot of ways. You have a commercial at least, like, getting those elements right. You can do that cheaply because you have so much freedom, in a lot of ways.
And I'd be curious, what's your, like, I would say maybe budget approach to color? Because I feel like color is one of those things when we watch films, TV on screen, it's something that registers, but maybe you don't, it's almost more of like a subconscious thing. Like, how did you refine your color palette and how you approached it as you were coming up?
As in color that's like in the scene, or how we actually color the film?
No, I would say probably like that's in the scene from like a production design. Like, I think that's one of those small details that becomes a little more subconscious versus it's a conscious decision before you even start hitting record.
I will really go for a lot of texture in my scenes, like a ton of texture. So like something that's like, things are more clinical, I really struggle with that. And so I'm always looking for texture and just built-in color in a way that just, when I first started doing it, like it was just something that felt right. I was just like really listening to your instincts. Like your taste is so important, and it's so hard to know what your taste is until you try things that you don't like. But it's just about listening to being like, I don't know what it is about this location, but it's just like speaking to me. Like I just like it. It's something about it feels right. And you can't really quantify it until you get a little bit later as a director, when you start to really understand, like you're breaking down, like, I know exactly why I like this location. But early on, it's just like a feeling. And so I would go for so many colors in the scene. And I wasn't like a very cool or tasteful or creative person in college or high school. Like I wasn't one of those kids. I was like an athlete. I didn't have much, I was not cool. I wasn't listening to cool music and doing stuff like that. And so I just had to, but who you are, like that's innate. And like, you can feel that in some of the elements that you're working with early on. So like listening to that is really how you start to form that taste and form that vision. And you can kind of start to like replicate it more intentionally as you get later into your career. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I like what you're saying about instincts, because I'm that way too, both like good and bad. Like if something feels right, something doesn't feels right, to go with it. But like you said, you only get more in tune with that the more that you do it.
And like a big decision I made that like affected my career a lot was I did one commercial for Driscoll's Berries is a berry company. Everyone's probably eating Driscoll's berries, but you may not even know that you're eating them. Anyway, this was like a huge moment for me in like unlocking something, because we were doing scouting and the scout was giving me all these homes. They were perfectly fine homes to shoot in. I was like, this is a fine home. This is a fine home. And there was one house that came through, and it was like a trap house. It was like in the hood. There was no AC. It was the middle of summer in Atlanta. It was tiny. It was cramped. It was carpeted. It was old. It had so much character, and something about it just lit me up. I was just like, I freaking love this house. But everyone was like, dude, this is not the house. Like practically, like no one's going to like this house. No one like saw it, but there was something about the house where I was just like, the film takes place here for me. Like this is where I see this thing taking place. And dude, I had to make a really tough decision at that time without a ton of confidence in myself to be like, oh, we're going to go with this house. And I had to take that to the agency and to the client and explain to them why we were shooting in a trap house in the hood of Atlanta. And they were like super nervous about it and be like, why are we doing this? Why aren't we shooting in this really nice house or this craftsman or this whatever? And I was just really trusting my instinct on that. And that was one of the best choices I made for my career. They absolutely loved it. It gave that film a feeling that would never have been able to be true in the other homes. And the way we styled it, we styled it up a little bit, which is always easier to bring a space up than it is to bring a space down. And it just gave the film so much texture and so much character. And so that was like a good moment for me where I was like, okay, like there's something about my tastes for some of these elements that I have to start trusting. And so I've carried that with me for every job, being like, and I always pick the house that no one wants to film in. Always. It's like, you have to trust yourself so much as a director, because everyone has so many reasons why they want you to do something a certain way, but you have to know in your heart, this is not right for the film. And you are the guardian of the feel, of the aesthetic, of the feeling. And you have to go to war for a lot of these choices to a degree. And that is really how you like.
Man, I'm fired up. And that brings up like one of the great like last points I want to get into is this dance of client agency where, they are coming to you for a specific vision, but then you are dancing around these choices like you just mentioned. I feel like that's another muscle that gets better with time. How has that, relationship building, mending process been for you?
You want to deliver on what you're promising in the treatment. So like as clear as you can be in the treatment, the better, like with your references. And that way, like in the process, as you're going along, you can be like, look, man, you hired me to do this. Look, it's all right here. I'm literally just doing what I sold you on. And you'll find that agencies and clients, they get cold feet, even on the idea that they kind of wrote. And like, but as it's happening, they'll be like, oh my God, this is really happening. And so I'm always kind of bringing them back to the original conversations and just being like, listen, trust me, like stay the course. Like this is what we set out to do. Like we're making this film. We got excited about it. And there's a lot of handholding as a director. It's like being a parent. There's a lot of handholding and there's a lot of fear on the agency and client side. My career is riding on this. Please, my family, they're going to starve, whatever. And there's a lot of elements of you having to have a ton of confidence to be like, trust me on this journey. Let's not compromise now, but like, we're gonna like get there. This location, I'm telling you, it's perfect. And they'll be like, oh, I don't know, it looks really dark or whatever. They can't see it. They can't imagine what it will look like when it's lit or when it's styled. And you have to be able to imagine what it's going to look like when you have your crew there. And so I will say this, like early in my career, I was a yes man, always. Oh yeah, totally. Like we'll do that. Yeah. Like I can fix that. I can change that. I would get in the edit every time and I'd be like, I freaking hate this shot. And now it's negatively affecting my career. And I knew it. I knew that this was the wrong answer, but I didn't trust myself enough to do it. And so last year, for the first time ever, 2024, I was like, I'm not going to become an asshole director, because the age of the asshole director is actually done. A client, and there's too many options now. They will leave you behind. They used to be able to, like, if you were an editor, if you were a director, you used to be able to be like, look, sorry, dudes, we're doing this, like, good luck. And I'm getting my film and you can, like, you can go to hell or whatever. And like, some guys still do that, but unless you're just like a monster, unless you're Martin Scorsese, you're not doing that. Like you might get a great film, but they're not going to call you back.
Work with it. Yep.
You better get an awesome film out of that, because you're never going to work with that agency again. And some guys will still do this. Like they'll nuke the relationship and they'll get an amazing film out of it. And I'll be like, I know that that's not what the agency wanted, but damn, you got something awesome. And you took a huge risk. You got your film. And now you moved on to the next one. And that actually can work. I wouldn't recommend it. My strategy has always been to be more amenable. So going back to what I was saying, in 2024, I was like, I'm going to draw harder lines on my vision for some things. I'm going to fight more for what I want.
The game is tough. And I feel like almost 50% of it is like who has the most resilience and who can like withstand the longest, because like you said, it's so competitive. So no, I appreciate you sharing that, because it's like it's such every client's different, every job is different, and there's no like exact cookie cutter way how to handle it. And now you just build on the next time. And
the resilient part, like you got to be, quarterback memory, whatever you say, like,
yep.
Like, and you have to understand that luck is such a big part of this job, like such a big part of this job. You can do everything right. You can do everything perfectly right, but the client's cousin might be a videographer and that's going to come up and you're going to lose a couple of jobs that way. Like you have to chalk up a few losses to just like nonsense. And it's happened to me time and time again. You want a massive job. The budget the agency just lost their client, and the agency's all fired now. The people you've been talking to for the last 2 weeks, they're all out of a job, and consequently you're out of a job. Like I've built a very thick skin, but early in my career, some of those losses were so painful. Like, they were so painful, feeling like I was so close and feeling like there was such injustice that I just worked so hard on this thing and it didn't go my way. And I wasn't just not getting the job, but I was not getting paid anything. Like dealing with some of those early losses, I think a lot of people quit during that phase. I think I just didn't quit because I had no choice but to not quit. I didn't have a plan B, and that helped in a lot of ways. And so I'm still in that. Like I'll scratch and claw and fight until the bitter end, and whenever that is, could be today as far as I know.
Well, let's talk about that to just round out our conversation. Like, what is next? Is it a crossover feature film, television? Has that always been a goal? Or do you like the commercial space? What kind of things have you thought about? And I think being a parent changes that a lot as well.
I'm 34 now, and I just now feel like I know exactly what I want to say in my work. But it's taken me quite a long time to get there. So, but now I'm in a situation where I have 2 kids. I'm not in a massive market anymore, like physically. And so I've had to just get really like intentional and think about like, well, what does it really look like? Like, if I'm being honest, if I want to be a proper director making TV and film, I probably need to move to LA. I probably need to start networking in the same way that I did that in New York. I need to start getting on the radar of people, and not only doing that, but also making good work at the same time. But like, I'm not going to parties every night. I'm not networking like I used to network. So what does it really look like? So for me, I'm writing a ton. I'm writing more than I've ever written narratively. Like I'm just like pouring out scripts because I'm finally just like dialed into the things I want to be. saying, and I also have enough filmmaking knowledge now where I know like what is doable, and could still be good. And so for me, I'm trying to form filmmaking community where I'm at, and try and make low cost narrative work in between the commercial projects, and just not worry so much about the destination of that, because I think like, man, I mean, like narrative filmmaking is in a really bad place right now. Indie filmmaking is in a really bad place. Big Hollywood director is in a really bad place. Hollywood itself is in a really bad place. LA, was on fire not long ago. Like, oh, many reasons to not believe in the narrative dream. And so I think you got to do it because it's a way for you to process your life through your art and through an artistic endeavor. Like you gotta want to do it without worrying about the outcome so much. So for me, I'm going to start making features now because I need to start making features, because commercials are not doing it for me anymore. And as a creative person, I believe that like God has given me a call to use these skills to tell stories. And so like, I got no clue if anything's going to come of that whatsoever, but I'm going to start doing it because I need to start doing it. And if it goes somewhere, it goes somewhere. But I think I've accepted the fact that I'm probably not going to move to LA. I'm probably going to be here. I'm probably going to, I'm obviously going to continue to focus on raising my family. And so I got to make films in this context now. Like that door's closed. This is the door I'm in, and I'm going to make it in this lane. And trust that whatever happens, from that point on. So that's not the playbook I would write for a young filmmaker. I would say move to LA. Just do it. Move there.
Yep.
Make it
I
work.
feel like that a lot. Yep.
Network your way in if you want to be a narrative filmmaker. That door is closed for me. It just is, like, for now, because I chose to have multiple children and raise them in this context. And so like, that's just not the path I'm on, but that would be the path I would give my young single self. That would be the advice I would give. It'd be like, go.
But then we wouldn't have met in New York, so it's all good.
Yeah, there you go. You go to New York, go to LA, start from there. Like, don't get married, don't have kids until you are ready, or be willing to be even more resilient.
Yeah.
So
no, it's and I think too what you were saying, I'm like very much on a parallel path, and I think maybe it is, to your point, like it is being in your mid 30s. I finally feel like I'm at a point too where I'm like, all right, what do I want to say? How do I want to say it? And I don't think I could have done that even in my like late 20s. I think part of life experience comes with that, and I'm excited to see what you're up to and what your voice is going to come out through, because I think we're both kind of in that similar struggle and trying to figure this whole career thing out, along with like raising a wonderful family.
Definitely.
Well, cool, man. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show on Frame by Frame. I think you dropped some big knowledge on what it takes to be a commercial director and how to get there. And I think you were super open and honest, which I really appreciate. And I can't wait to see what you're going to do the next year.
Yeah, man. Anytime. Thanks for having me. It's been great chatting. So let's do it again.
If you want to learn more, make sure that you subscribe to my channel. And if you could rate us on the platform you're listening to, that would be a huge help to get the word out. I would really appreciate 5 stars if this conversation was helpful for you. Thank you so much for watching, for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode of Frame by Frame.